All right, so last time we were together, we saw how Marx explains the transformation of the value of labor power into what we actually see in the world, wages. This idea of a price for labor. But that appearance, as we learned, hides what's really going on. So now we're diving into chapter 20 to look at the most common form this takes, the time wage. We're going to peel back the layers and see exactly how paying for someone's time becomes the key mechanism for obscuring the real source of profit.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll quickly refresh that crucial difference between labor and labor power. Then, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the time wage formula itself. From there, we'll see how that simple formula can be manipulated by extending the working day. And we'll wrap up by looking at the biggest trick the time wage pulls off, which will lead us right into our next discussion on piece wages.
Okay, first things first. The very idea of a price of labor. Marx calls this an irrational expression, and for a very specific reason. He argues that it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually being bought and sold. This is such a critical point. You can't actually buy labor. Why? Because labor is a process. It's the act of creating value. What a capitalist actually buys is your capacity to work for a certain amount of time. That's your labor power. So for Marx, talking about the price of labor is a category mistake. It's like talking about the price of digestion instead of the price of the food you eat. And this confusion is key because it immediately clouds the whole transaction. So, if what's being sold is labor power, how does it end up getting priced by the hour or by the day? Well, Marx gives us a formula that looks incredibly simple on the surface, but as we're about to see, it has some powerful implications. So a time wage is simply the monetary form of the daily value of labor power. Now remember, that daily value is determined by whatever it costs to keep a worker alive, healthy, and able to show up for work the next day. Food, rent, the whole shebang. The time wage just takes that total daily cost and chops it up into hourly pieces. And here's the formula right here. The hourly wage isn't some arbitrary number. It's a fraction. It's the daily value of labor power, the numerator, divided by the number of hours in the working day, the denominator. Now, the crucial thing to notice immediately is that denominator. The length of the working day is a variable, it's flexible, and that's going to be the key to everything that follows. Let's make this real with an example. Let's say the daily value of a worker's labor power is 3 shillings. That's what they need to live for the day. And the normal working day is 12 hours long. You just do the math. 3 shillings is 36 pence. You divide that by 12 hours, and you get an hourly wage of 3 pence. Seems perfectly straightforward, right? A fair calculation. Well, this is where that seemingly neutral formula starts to reveal its hidden power. Marx shows us what happens when the capitalist starts to play with one of those variables, specifically when they just make the working day longer. So let's think about this. The numerator, the daily cost of keeping the worker alive, stays the same at 3 shillings. A person's got to eat, right? But what happens to that hourly wage when the denominator, the number of hours you're working, goes up? The price of labor per hour actually falls. It goes down. By stretching the working day from 12 to 15 hours, the capitalist is still paying 3 shillings for the day. But now they're dividing that 36 pence by 15. So the hourly wage drops from 3 pence all the way down to 2.4 pence. The worker is literally being paid less for each hour of their work. So you can see the outcome. First, the price paid per hour of labor drops. Now, second, the worker's total daily pay might stay the same or even go up a little, which kind of hides what's really happening. But third, and this is the most important part, the amount of unpaid surplus labor time that the capitalist extracts just skyrockets. This means a much higher rate of exploitation. Okay, but that's not the only way this works. Marx shows us the flip side. What if, instead of starting by extending the day, the capitalist just comes in and cuts the hourly wage directly? This is what makes the time wage such a powerful coercive tool. If your hourly pay is cut, you simply can't earn enough to survive in the old number of hours. You're now trapped between 2 bad options. Either you earn less than you need to live, or you agree to work longer hours. And this kicks off a vicious cycle. The lower wage forces you to work longer. Those longer hours then become the new normal, which basically solidifies the lower hourly rate as the new standard. Overtime stops being an option and becomes a necessity just to scrape by, and all the while, the capitalist is the one who benefits from all that extra surplus labor time. So all of this brings us to the real core of the argument, the ideological function of the time wage. Why is this way of paying people so fundamental to capitalism? Well, it's all about what it manages to hide in plain sight. This is the big reveal. The time wage completely erases any visible difference between the two parts of the working day.
There's the necessary labor, the time you spend working to earn your own wage, and then there's the surplus labor, the time you spend working for free, creating profit for the capitalist. Because you get an hourly wage, it looks like every single hour is paid for equally. So on the surface, the appearance is a simple, fair trade. You give an hour of your time, you get an hour's worth of pay. But the reality, as Marx's formula shows, is that your hourly wage is just the cost of your daily survival, spread out over all the hours you're forced to work. That wage covers your necessary labor, but it also completely hides the surplus labor, the unpaid part, which is where all the profit comes from. So ultimately, the function of the time wage is ideological. It's a powerful tool of mystification. It makes exploitation invisible by presenting every single hour of work as paid work. The source of profit, that unpaid surplus labor, is hidden right there in what looks like a fair and transparent deal. So, now that we've taken apart the mechanics and the ideology of the time wage, we're ready to move on. In our next explainer, we'll get into Chapter 21 and look at its close cousin, the peace wage. And this is the question I'll leave you with. If paying by the hour is such a great way to hide exploitation, what happens when you start paying people for each item they produce? Does that make the relationship more transparent and fair? Or is it just an even more effective way to disguise the same old thing? We'll dig into all of that next time.